Welcome back to this week's podcast. So absolutely fantastic to have you with me again as ever. And firstly, I just wanted to say thank you to a number of people that have reached out to say recently that they've enjoyed the podcast, they found it helpful, and they've been really finding some of the tips useful, which is prompted my conversation for today, which we're going to cover off in a moment, which I think is really, really important for me, but also really important for you guys, hopefully, that are listening to this. But yeah, first I just want to say, if you have got questions, if you do listen to the podcast, want to reach out to me on LinkedIn or any other social media network, then please reach out. It'd be great to hear from you. But the reason being, someone reached out to me and was talking about the power that the podcast has helped them with, and I thought maybe think about actually why I do this. And so today I wanted just to share with you 12 very simple sales tips that you could implement today. And so what I'd ideally love you to do is, you may be listening to this driving. If you are, then obviously you can't do this. But if you're listening sort of and write these 12 tips down. I'm going to try and just put 12 simple tips that I've used in my sales career that I encourage you to use if you're struggling with sales, if things aren't going the way you want it to. Then these 12 tips are simple to implement today. You can implement them straight away, and they will make a massive material difference in your sales approach over time if you also apply the other things that I talk about as well. So I'm going to go through this 12, and I'm going to share a bit more detail behind each one, but there's a practical tip behind each individual element that you can write down. And I'm even going to probably get this transcribed, so this whole video can be and recording can be transcribed, so that you can have the full recording if you want for the actual phrases that I use. But so these are 12 tips to basically start implementing today if you're not already using them. So, point number one, tip number one, when you've got booked a meeting with someone, the key thing you want to have is a meeting that is in the diary with that person. So you want to ensure that there is a date and time in their diaries. It appears most people now have got Google or Microsoft calendars. You want there to be a date and time in their diary. So they look at their phone or their PC and go, oh, okay, I've got a meeting with so-and-so at that time. But one of the key things that people don't do is they don't create curiosity or intrigue in the meeting invite. So one of the things I want you to do straight away is, so I've got a meeting with someone tomorrow that's a prospect, someone's recommended me to them, and I will even read out to you the subject line of that I'm going to use in the conversation. The subject line is driving sales growth call with X customer. That's with X organization. So driving sales growth for customer is the name of the person. So I make the subject line and the invitation very focused on what I can do. So what I want that person to do is when they look at the meeting invite and to go, oh, right, yeah, I do need this to help me drive sales growth. So whatever service you offer, so if you're in IT, solving IT challenge could be your subject line. If you're in cybersecurity, it could well be fixing or ensuring your network stays safe conversation. If you're selling to HR, it could be getting more from your team conversation. So I want you to really just make sure that the subject line that you use, that you invite that person to, has something in it, rather than just meeting with so-and-so, that uses a narrative around what you're going to do, what's your USP, what's your bit that you do. In my case, I drive sales growth for companies. I help them achieve, grow their business and grow their numbers. But what's the thing that you do? And put that in the subject line. It's a small thing, but it's such a powerful thing because it sets the sort of the ball rolling in the mind of the other person that that's what you're there to do. And that's the purpose of that conversation. And if it's ideally focusing what you say based upon solving a problem for them, then it's going to be even more powerful because they're going to think, oh, right, yeah, I've got this issue. Oh, this person's going to help me solve that. So it makes a big difference. So that's point number one, is send an invite with a really positive subject line to create a bit of intrigue in the mind of the person. Okay, so point number two is this. When people have sales meetings, people say to me, well, how do I run the meeting? How can I make the meeting go the way I want it to? And one of the things that I will do in any meeting, like the person I'm meeting tomorrow, the first 20 seconds of the conversation, and this is going to be a Zoom call, and most calls like people have nowadays can be Zooms or team calls, or sometimes on the phone. But I would use the first 20 to 30 seconds of the meeting to understand who that person is and get a vibe off that person. And I will adjust my approach accordingly. So one of the things I'd like you to do is when you have a meet, there's another podcast which I'll link to around the 4 types of people that there are out there. They're dominant, based upon disc profiles, so dominant, influence, steady, and conscientious. There are 4 different types of people. And again, Thomas Erickson's book, Surrounded by Idiots, I really recommend people listen and read that. But one of the things you can try and do, and I do courses on this, is to try and help you understand the type of person that you're initially speaking to. And I will try and match the vibe of the other person from the first 30 seconds. Because most people normally, when you get onto a call, will go, you can get a sense of who they are. So if you get someone that, and I guess that I get a feeling that the person I'm meeting tomorrow, I looked at their role, it's a technical director role, they're a founder. I think they'll be a bit more, they're in a technical background. So my gut feel is it's likely that person is more often than not a conscientious person. A bit more, they're not going to be the most flamboyant people out there. They're going to be a bit more reserved, a bit more quieter, a bit more detailed, a bit more methodical. So therefore, I will adjust my approach and be a bit calmer in return. So I won't just be, hi, I'm James, and this is great to have a conversation. I'll be, oh, good, yeah, good afternoon, great to meet you, and yeah, tell me a bit more about you and what's going on and whatever else, rather than being, hey, I'm James. But sometimes people say, oh, you should just be yourself. But the problem is it takes 7 seconds for a person to get an impression of you, and they then use the rest of their time with you to reinforce that opinion of you in that first place. And if you, to someone that's a bit quieter or a bit more introverted, come across as being this flashy, gobby salesperson, they're going to have this sort of thought process in their mind. Now, if you find that person to be really outgoing, then match that, okay? If you find them to be, oh, hey, great to see you, then be a bit more positive and a bit more upbeat. But try in the first 20, 30 seconds just to get an assessment of the person. And if you're not sure, just be a bit sort of middle of the road calm. But if you get a sense that they're quite effervescent and outgoing and more bubbly and more chatty, then be the same back if you can. But if you get the sense they're a bit quieter and a bit calmer and a bit more reserved, then also adjust your approach accordingly. So point number 2 is just whenever you're having these first conversations, just try and be clever to assess the person on what you think they are or their style, and adjust your approach accordingly. And by the way, there's lots more I could talk around that subject. It's an area that I'm passionate about in general, but it's probably a subject on its own. I think I have actually covered it in a podcast, which I'll try and link to. But it's such a key area to get that assessment and build those soft skills to assess people for sure. So point number 3, and I want you to do, you start your meetings with a really, really simple phrase, which shows that you're not focused on what you do. Most people don't want sales conversations and sales meetings because they think, oh, I don't want to be sold to. And because they feel sold to, they then feel like the barriers go up and they don't want to say things because they feel people are going to take advantage of them. So, but also, most people just get into conversations and then get pitched at. Or, my coach once told me, Susie, she always used to say, people wheel over people. We do this, we do that, we do this, we do that. Actually, most prospects don't want to hear it. I certainly do. If someone comes to me in a sales meeting with me and then starts talking about their solution and what they do and how they do it, I'm like, whatever. So a great way to start the meeting is to use this phrase. You can, and again, I'll try and touch it, but you can press thought, pause, and you can use a variation of this slightly, but the concept of the phrase is this. It's great that we've got 30 to 60 minutes of time set aside today. What would you like to cover that would make it a valuable use of your time? So I'll repeat that again. It's great that we've got 30 minutes, 60 minutes set aside today to have a conversation. What would you like to cover that would make it a valuable use of your time? And what that does is when you start issuing that phrase, you're then going to get the person say, well, I want to cover this, this, and this. And what that's then going to do, if you're clever, and I'll talk about the next in point number 8 below, if you're clever, you can also then sort of really start to dig a bit more into the areas that they're interested in to find out what really matters to them. But what it also does is it shows the prospect that you're not just focused on you, you're focused on them. And as I always say, and I continue to say it, and I've said it time and time again, people don't buy stuff because of you. They buy for what impact it makes for them and what issues it solves in their world. And as salespeople, we've got to get clever and cute and understanding that it's not about us. It's about about the other side. So start the meeting with this simple phrase. As I say, it's great that we've got 30 to 60 minutes set aside for today. What would you like to cover, or what would be the top 2 or 3 things you'd like to cover that would make it a valuable use of your time? Now, there are some people that will say, oh, you should start the meeting in a slightly different way. You should start the meeting by telling that your time is just as important as them. Yeah, you can do that. Of course, your time is important. You could say what would make it useful would be valuable use of both of our time. But in many cases, I think that comes across as a little bit sort of like up your own backside a lot of the time. And you know what? There's other methods in the sales conversation. If you thoroughly think that the conversation is not going anywhere and you're being, you feel like you're having to bow down to them, there's other things you can do at a point in time. But I always use that phrase initially just so we can really make sure that the conversation is then focused on the other, especially if you've pushed for the meeting to happen and they've agreed to it. The key thing is not your chance then to pitch, is to find out what really matters, what's really going on inside their brain that's going to make them think, this was a good use of your time. And if they say to you, and a bonus point 3.5, if they say, well, I want to use this conversation to find out more about you and your company and what you do, okay, requalify that question by saying, there's lots I can share about us and what we do and our company. What are the areas in particular that you'd like more information on? Because invariably, the person that's asking the question isn't really saying, well, please, talk to me for an hour about your company and your history and whatever else. They're not asking for that. What they're basically saying is there's something going on in their brain around you and your company that they want to find out, and they want you to be able to get that information from them. So find out what they want to use for the time. And if that conversation is, tell me about your company, then dig further into that and find out really what is it about your company. There's lots you can share. You could talk for hours. I've said to people, I can talk for hours about what I do and what I do, but that's not of interest to you. What are the key things you'd like to know? And they might then say, I want to know how you deliver your solution, who it's worked for, and what makes you different. And then you can say, great, talk to me a little bit more about that. You mentioned you want to talk about how, who it's worked for, what sort of companies in particular are you thinking that you'd like to see here, or what in particular would be useful. I can share lots of stories, so lots of information. What would you like to know? So it's about being able to dig into that part of the conversation. So once you've done that, and hopefully you've given some insights and which you've used to then create an agenda. Point number 4 is a really simple thing I always do in a sales conversation as well, which I'm going to encourage you to do, which you're probably going to think, oh my goodness me, James, I can't do this. This would be the wrong thing to do. But trust me on this, you have to use it. And that's go backwards to go forwards. So what I will do in any conversation I'll have, I will try and sort of use a phrase like this. And what I call it is the pressure valve of release on the buyer. Because most people, again, when they're sitting into a sales conversation, thinking, I'm going to be sold to, this is going to be a sales conversation, it's going to be me being pushed, pushed down my throat. And that puts the barriers up. They don't really want to engage. They don't want to talk. So what I will always do is release the pressure valve. And I'll say something like, it's great that that we've been able to chat today. And if at the end of our conversation, it turns out that there isn't anything we can do together, or we're not a good fit, then, hey, I totally respect that. And if that's the case, we've only lost 30 minutes of time. So you can create your own phrase and version of that, but something on the round, it's great to be able to chat today. And if at the end of the conversation, it turns out that we're not a good fit, or it turns out that what we do isn't what you're looking for, then, hey, totally respect this, in which case we've only lost 30 minutes of time. So what it does is it just releases the sales pressure valve and makes the buyer think, oh, right, so they're not just going to pursue me and put me into harass me for days and hours to come after this if something's not going to be right. No, because that's the bit where sales isn't about subserving. Sales isn't about, we're not a good fit for someone. If we can't do something that's going to make a difference for them, we're better off to say, it may not be that we can help them, or it may well be they're looking for A and you offer B, for example. So, but this idea of going backwards to go forwards is so important. It releases the pressure valve, and you'll get more from the conversation than you will if you just start to go into, this sort of sales mode and have commission breath and start talking to people. So that's point number 4. So point number 5 is this. Do some research on the person and the company. So again, this is something you can all start to do straight away, and know their challenges and issues. And if you don't know, if it's in an area that you don't, let's say you're talking to a manufacturing director of a large, I don't know, publishing company, it may well be that you don't know much about that industry or that subject, but go and ask. This is where ChatGPT or AI tools can be really powerful for you. Go on there and say, what are the challenges for a manufacturing director an IT director at a manufacturing company? And it will provide you some insights, and you can then start to look and say, how up to date are these challenges, and where does this research come from? So come to the conversation with some value. And this is a fine line between, we don't want to see that we've stalked people, but I want to see that people have done some research on what and who they're talking to. The guy that I'm meeting tomorrow, I'll have done some research looking at him. I'll have looked at his LinkedIn profile. I'll have asked ChatGPT a bit more about them when they started. I'll have looked at some company's details. I'll have looked at a number of different things around who they are. So that, and I won't say that, I won't blurt those out straight away. So I see you do this, and this. But what I might then do is drop those into the conversation. When someone might talk about something, I might say, oh yeah, I saw from reading a bit more about you guys that you did this, and this. So it shows that I've done my research. So just come prepared based upon the challenges that these people face. If you don't know, go to ChatGPT or an AI agent and try and get some of that information. You can, but come to the conversation ready to share some value so that you know a bit more about their world. If you go into that conversation and ask a question such as, what are the biggest problems that you face in your world? That's an old school style. And most people go, well, you should know that, or they get frustrated. Certainly someone wants to have a sales conversation with me and someone says, well, what's the challenges of running a sales training company? I'm like, you don't know my business. You don't know who I am. Whereas if they come to the conversation and say, look, I've sensed from talking to other people and from doing my research that some of the challenges that you guys face in the sales training business are this, and this. Tell me more about how these sort of work for you. Then I'm going, okay, they get what this is about and what this could look like, and they understand what we're trying to achieve and the drivers behind that. So point number 5 is do your research on that person. Every salesperson should be able to do that research. It doesn't have to take hours, but just spend 5-10 minutes looking at some background and write some notes down in a book that you can use then for reference in the conversation. So point number 6 is this: have a set of simple prepared questions ready to use. So, and if you don't have any, by the way, I'm going to put a link to my 52 sales questions to ask. It's one of my most popular downloads. I'm going to put a link to my website, and it'd be great, by the way, to hear from you guys. If you're there's lots of resources on my website at www.jameswhite.business, and one of them is a completely free 5th set of 52 questions. But have some questions that are prepared, and ideally they should be prepared based upon the questions that I can share on that guide are really helpful and are generic. But you should have some stuff that's also linked to your industry or linked to the person you're meeting. So just have a list of 5 to 10, maybe 15 questions, and you don't want to go through them. I've asked question 1 and sort of be really monotonous with that, but you do want to be able to have some questions prepared so that you can make sure that you're opening up the conversation with them. And that leads me on then to point number 7, which is, in the first part of the sales conversation, try and make sure that you use every question that you have to be how or what questions. And by the way, in the 52 questions document I've mentioned, which I'll share a link to, I used how. Most of those questions are how or what questions. So a good example of that, a lot of people will say, we'll ask questions like, do you use a provider at the moment? And the answer to that question will generally be a yes or no. Whereas, what provider do you currently use at the moment, and how has that been going for you? You're going to open up more conversation. So the guy that I'm going to go and speak to tomorrow, I'll be saying to them, tell me a bit more about, who else, what other companies have you spoken to about trying to do this? How have you tried to drive growth in the past? What challenges have you faced when you've implemented previous solutions? So what I'll be doing is how or what questions to dig into really what's going on in that person's world. And even if they're a bit more quiet and a bit more reserved, if I'm asking those questions in a simple way, they're going to be more likely to open up. I'm going to find information up as a result of that. So that's point number 7. So point number 8, which is following on from those how and what questions, is when you get an answer, probe that answer in a really more empathetic way. So let's just say I'm speaking to someone tomorrow, and they're going to say to me, yeah, we've tried to fix, I might ask them a question such as, how have you tried to fix this problem in the past? And they might say to me, oh yeah, well, we previously used a marketing agency who promised that they were going to deliver leads for us, and then it didn't happen. And what most people will then do is forget about that. Whereas I'll go, oh, goodness me, I'm sorry to hear that that didn't work out for you. Tell me more about that. What happened? Who did you appoint? What was the challenge there? But I'll do it in such a way, like I've just said, through that tonality. I'll do it in a really empathetic way. I'm so sorry to hear what happened. Tell me more. I'm interested in hearing more about what's going on with that person and what happened in the past. And they might then proceed to tell me, well, we appointed this company based in such and such, and they didn't do this they said they would do this and didn't do this. And I will continue to keep probing up until such a point where that person basically doesn't want to share anymore. And you can normally tell that in the body language and signals they give. So I might say, so what happened? What didn't go the way you expected it to, and what did they promise, and what was the implications of that, and how's that made you feel? And I guess, what's that done to your confidence level in looking for a solution? Because invariably, the goal that we get that takes deals forwards and that stops them from happening comes in the questioning and the way we probe and the information, what I call underneath the surface. So if you imagine you're a dog, you're not just literally just probing beneath the initial part of the ground. You're really digging underneath it fully, and that's what's going to give you the information. So really try and probe in a bit more of a really empathetic way. And I think the first, if you're making the conversation about the other person, sales conversations, they should be speaking for 70% of the time, 60 to 65 to, at least 2/3 to 1/3 is them talking. And if you're asking these how, what questions and you're probing with them in empathy, again, the way you say it, as always in sales, is really key. If you say, oh, well, tell me more, they're going to be like, oh, I don't want to tell you, my back's up. Whereas if you say, what happened there? Talk me through that. What was going on there? People are generally happy to share stuff around themselves if they feel the other person is interested. So probing it in an empathetic way. And when you start to probe and dig beneath the surface, what I sometimes call pick the scab gently, you start to really uncover the true pain. And when you uncover the true pain, and the impact of that pain is going to cause them and where it fits in their priority list, that's where deals happen. Okay, so point number 9 is when you've reached the end, be conscious of the time. If you've set 30 minutes aside for the conversation, then be cognizant of that. And again, if you really also feel that the person you're talking to isn't going to be helpful, you can't help them, or they can't help you, then it gives you a chance to actually end the conversation and say, look, we've reached the end of the slot that we've had here. Really enjoyed chatting to you, but I don't think from our conversation we're going to be able to help you. Or you might find that they're open to carrying on for a little bit longer. And if you think there's a good fit, you can carry that on. But look to summarize the conversation. So one of the things I will do is to say, look, I've really enjoyed chatting to you today. And what I've taken from our conversation is that you are looking to drive some further sales growth in the business, but you've struggled to find a provider that can work for you. You have used someone else in the past, but they've done this and this, and this. What have I missed? What have I missed? Or how does that reflect our conversation in your views? What you want them to do is to agree to basically what you've summarized. And when you summarize something, it makes that person feel like you've listened to them. And when you feel like someone listens to you, it builds a connection, a trust that makes them think that you're the right person to work with. So summarize the conversation, write down the key 4 or 5 notes. You don't have to go through every line by line item of it. And some people wait for AI tools and then summarize afterwards. Summarize it there and then, this is what I've covered in the conversation. What have I missed? Or what have I missed that we should have covered? Or, what did we go through here that was most useful for you? Try and get a sense from that person initially from that summarization as to where they are. So that's point number 9. And then point number 10 is to then, if you feel in your head that there's a good fit here, what their problem is, their challenges you can solve, then what I would always look to do is try and make sure I set the date and time for the next conversation. It always amazes me when leads, people say to me, there's a lead happening. I'm like, what's happening next? When's the next call? When's the next conversation? Oh, well, they're going to come back to me sometime. I'm like, I wouldn't leave it to that. So as a tip you can implement tomorrow would be, if you think there's a good fit, I would say something like, it's been great to understand more about you and what you're looking to do. Obviously, we've reached the end of our time now, but it would be great to share a few ideas with you and carry the conversation on. So how would next Thursday at 4 p.m. or tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. work for you to sort of speak next and to move things forward? And if you give them that date and time, they'll do one or two things. If they're interested in carrying on the conversation and they think you're helpful and useful and they can see some value in what you do, they'll look in their diary and say, I can't do tomorrow, but I can do next Monday. And you can work a time back and forth between yourselves then. If they go, oh, I'll come back to you, then basically that's a code for them saying that they didn't think the conversation was very useful. And pretty much they don't want to carry that discussion on. So at that stage, I would be more likely to say, look, totally understand that you've got some stuff to think of. What I don't want to do is become a pain and try and contact you in a couple of weeks' time and then find the conversations becomes difficult. If what we've discussed and dealing with these issues or finding a solution to this isn't a priority, hey, look, no worries, I'll leave you to it. So what I'll try and do is I'll sort of look for the confirmation of the date and time, and I get that in as an invite. Look, I'm going to, I'll send them an invite there and then say, great, I've sent you an invite for next Thursday at 4 p.m. and we'll do follow-up conversation to driving sales growth or solving the sales growth challenge or whatever else, like I did mention in point number 1. So carry the conversation on. Don't leave a meeting with a prospect that is an opportunity without a definitive next date and time action. And if there is that element of they don't want to give you that, then it should send warning signals in your head that something's not right. If I said to you, you were going to the dentist and the dentist was solving your pain and the dentist came back and said, yeah, I'll see you in a couple of weeks, maybe, give us a shout, whatever. You'd be like, no, I want to solve the pain. Give me a date and time to solve the pain. And if they don't want to do that, something's gone wrong. So point number 11 is this, and that's summarize the conversation and do what you said you would when you said you would. So ideally, you want to summarize the conversation in an email, if an email is the best way forward, pretty much like afterwards, a couple of hours afterwards. Certainly, if you say to someone, I'm going to share some information by the end of the week, then share it by that time. It builds trust when you say you will do what you'll do. So if you say, I'll send you a summary of the meeting by the end of today, if you then don't send it by the end of today, it starts to then make them not distrust you, but it starts to sort of create this little chink that actually are you going to do what you say you will if they start to work with you. So sort of do what you say you will, and summarize the conversation and build that trust up that you're a person that does what you say you will, and that builds in their mind a sense that, okay, if I work with this person, then they're going to not let me down. But point number 12 is, let's say you've set a conversation to follow up in, say, 2-3 weeks' time. Most people, in some cases, I say a lot of people, then start adding people to generic email lists, and they start adding them to their newsletter. So in the meantime, they're a prospect, and they start getting a newsletter about nothing. Like, well, what's the point of that? My biggest advice to you is to write down 3 of the top problems or challenges or issues that they've talked to you about. And then in the meantime, between then and obviously if the meeting's tomorrow, then don't do this. But if the meeting's in a week's time, share an email in between that time. So put it in your diary to follow up and say, really enjoyed our chat. Looking forward to catching up again Thursday. When we spoke, you mentioned about this issue. Here's something I've found that could be helpful. So here's a guide I've got that could be useful. Here's an article I found on a website like Forbes or Entrepreneur or whatever. Right? Obviously you don't want to recommend them to go to your competitor, although that's a brave, ballsy move if you want to do that. But just share them something of value. Share something that they're going to make them think, okay, well, this is quite useful actually. This is something that's is worthwhile looking at. And I think it's a really simple way for you to actually just get what I call a value stack in the mind of the other person. You want that person to obviously leave the conversation going, do you know what? I really enjoyed chatting to so-and-so. Really thought they were helpful. They were really useful in what they were sharing. But, you want them to then actually think, when they then see something else coming through, they think, wow, okay, he's really helpful again, that person. He's really useful. They could help me solve some challenges here. So they're looking forward to having a conversation with you. But don't add them into generic email lists or whatever else for the time being. If you put an automated campaign, add them into an automated campaign that is task focused to follow up. But don't, if I'm having a one-to-one conversation with someone, then they add me into their email list, I'm a bit like, I didn't want that. Or if you're going to do that, ask for permission. Hey, we share lots of insights on a daily basis. Would it help if I put you into that? Ask their permission before you start to do those sort of things. So look, there are 12 simple tips for selling that you can implement today. there's nothing that stops you from implementing some of these things right now. And I will, write them down and I will share them with you in an article, like I say, that you can implement today that can help you massively in your sales conversations and sales discussions. And look, there's lots of other elements around sales. I wish I was part of every sales conversation. I have people reach out to me and say, I'm struggling with this or struggling with that. And sometimes I wish that I was there with you and I could listen and review every sales conversation to know how they were going, but I can't be. But if you apply these 12 steps, and there's also another, basically I'm going to do another podcast. I think I've already done one. We're going to do another podcast on understanding soft skills. If you do take these steps, you're going to put yourself in a far better position to find out what's really going on with the other person and hopefully carry the conversation on and do some business together. But they're tips you can implement today. So literally, if you're driving, don't obviously write these stuff down. But if you're not driving, write these 12 tips and start implementing them. And tell me that you've implemented them. Reach out to me in social media, James White Sales. I implemented a couple of tips you said, and that's been helpful. It's to give me a bit more confidence. I've had a response from it. I had an email from a lady the other day that said, I used 2 of your openings and they got me what I wanted. And I was like, fantastic, great. It's what I love to hear. My heart sings when you guys tell me stuff that you're using that's working for you and that's helping you get a different result or a better result, which is awesome. So those are the points that I think are key from today. But let me know how you get on. Let me know what works for you. Let me know. But these are 12 tips that I think you can implement tomorrow, today, and start working, helping your sales process. If you're already using these tips already, because you've seen my content before, amazing. That's great news to hear. You're already on the right path to achieving the sales success that we all want. I want for you. So as I always do, I finish the podcast with an inspirational story, and I'm going to share the story of a guy who I came across a few months back, a guy called Craig Stone. And Craig basically had a job and then decided to become homeless. And people might say, well, what the heck would he do that for? And he lived under a tree in North London, and he wrote his book. And basically, Craig's a massive advocate for homeless people, so he wrote a book called "The Squirrel That Dreamt of Madness." And basically, he met his future wife through that as well. He's an advocate now for mental health. But it just was inspired me, the fact that even though he had a job and a career and everything was going for him, he decided to basically experience what life was like for someone that's homeless, and wrote a book when he was doing it. And that book then became a bestseller and has changed his life as a result of it. And sometimes I think, the best way we can make a difference happen is to really put ourselves in the shoes of the people we engage with. Talk about empathy, the ability to empathize how someone that's homeless is feeling is what Craig obviously did. So Craig Stone's the inspirational story. And as I always say with the podcast, people's stories like his are so valuable for us to have. Hopefully when you're going through tough times, or if you are going through a tough day, just always think there's always someone out there maybe that's struggling in a different way. And the fact we're listening to this and doing what we're doing means we're a bit lucky, I think. So maybe use that inspirational story to help you overcome any challenging times you're feeling. So therefore, that's it for this week's podcast. Hope it's been helpful for you. Please let me know if it has. I love hearing from you guys on what you think to the podcast, and if it's giving you some ideas. And if it hasn't, hey, tell me as well. I'm in sales been in sales a long time. I've got a skin as like a rhino's backside, so you won't offend me. If there's things I can do to make the podcast more effective for you, then I'd rather know than you listen to it and thinking, nah, I don't want to listen to him again. So, but let me know if you are listening. It's helpful. But as ever, thanks again for giving me your ears and your eyes if you're watching online. But it's great to hear you, and hopefully helping you achieve the sales success that you want to grow and achieve your dreams. But that's it until next week. Thanks ever so much for listening, guys. But I'll speak to you really soon. Have a great week and stay safe. Take care.